Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. I thought Romo had a couple of gems, and he kept saying, this Niner drive, he goes, this Kansas City defense, they've got to be tired. Now, they're young, and young players usually, San Francisco had multiple guys get dinged up, hit the ground. It's an older team. But I thought Romo pointed that out. I had said this about Andy Reid. If I look at Bill Belichick's career, it is overwhelmingly tied to one player. I mean, they were bad in New England before Brady. They were bad after him. Weren't very good in Cleveland. I'll say this. We don't consider Bill Russell with 11 rings better than Jordan with 6. I think Mahomes is the best quarterback I've ever seen. I think Andy Reid's the best coach I've ever seen. He's not tied. Donovan McNabb was a B- quarterback. He was always inaccurate. He was an athlete, not ideal size. He's always short hop stuff. He was kind of like he was a good quarterback.
He was out of shape in the Super Bowl, Colin. I mean, He was throwing up in the Super Bowl.
I just feel like Andy, who always gave Belichick problems, even with second-tier quarterbacks, I think Andy's a better coach than Belichick. First of all, when you go to overtime, we're all Romo and Nance are like, oh, this is Andy Reid. This is almost unfair. I mean, Andy hides stuff. So much of New England's success was tied to an offensive line coach. If you go look when Scott Pioli leaves in the last 8 or 9 drafts when Bill controlled him, he didn't draft well. He's allergic to offense. Once he lost offensive people, Bill really regressed badly. I think you look at Andy Reid's coaching tree, his ability to adapt, win with multiple quarterbacks, multiple coordinators. I think Andy's the best football coach since Bill Walsh. That's my take. Again, Bill Russell had some advantages. It was Red Auerbach. There were fewer teams. And Bill, I'm not, and in no way saying Bill, listen, he helps find Dante Scarnecchia. He drafted Brady. I think Andy Reid, we think Shanahan is elite. We both do. Top 3 or 4 coach in the year. That game comes down to that last drive. You have to acknowledge that Andy's doing stuff. They're hiding stuff they haven't used. I don't know. When I watch Andy Reid's teams in big games, he's the best coach off a bye of all time. He's now very close to being the best big game coach ever. They win more close games, more games they've trailed in the half. I'm not in any way discounting Mahomes' ability, but yet that last drive in overtime, it is so clever. How many 3rd and 2s and 4th and 2s did they run a play and you're like, oh, they haven't seen that one this year. I don't know. Where do we classify Andy Reid?
Yeah, I think he's definitely, Walsh is going to go down as probably the most famous coach of all time, right there with Lombardi, right? When you close your eyes, you say the NFL, you'd go Walsh, Lombardi, and you said Belichick too. Walsh won 3 Super Bowls. People forget Seifert won 2, right? So Andy now has 3. One thing that's not debatable with him and Bill, because I do think Bill has taken some unfair criticism. Like, we watched him make incredible moves in the biggest games, from double passes to not calling the timeout against Pete Carroll to embarrassing Sean McVay, who granted was like 34 at the time, but still they scored 3 points in the Super Bowl. When their teams are not Super Bowl contenders, right? And Andy's proven it he was making the playoffs with Jeff Garcia. He had Alex Smith competing to win that division when Peyton Manning was in it. You remove Tom Brady, the team is horrendous, awful. And I would say, if you just factor in the eras, and you've talked about this, Belichick in an era where defense is physical is cream of the crop, right? He was developing defensive game plans for Parcells to take out Walsh in Montana. Early on in Brady, he had those physical teams taking out Marshall Faulk in the Super Bowl, some of the great game plans. But that league no longer exists. The league we're in now is Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Andy Reid. Offensive league, innovative. How to get first downs is just, if not more important than defense. And Andy's the best. It's not even close. And I think anyone that knows him, and I knew him before he had a Super Bowl, he's just an incredible human being. That's one thing. people defend Belichick that have been around him because they had a lot of success around him. People defend Andy that have been around him before he won it because they liked him. Because the way he treated people, the way he acted in the office, the way he was to coaches. Look at his coaching tree. Like if you factor that in, one thing Bill Walsh got a lot of credit for, right, was won Super Bowls, always pivoted off players, and found guys like, I don't know, Mike Holmgren, George Seifert, who then led it. They had this, kind of opening with what came with coaches that ran the league. Bill was the opposite, right? Look at Andy's coaching tree. It's freaking incredible. And all those guys swear by him.
Yeah, Matt Nagy's considered a miss. In a time when Stafford, Rodgers, and Kirk Cousins were in their prime, he got Mitch Trubisky to the playoffs twice.
Mitch Trubisky is one of the. I think Mitch Trubisky was like the worst contract in the league. He made $8 million, and he's barely a third string quarterback. Matt Nagy's going to be head coach in the NFL again. Like I promise you, he will be. You know who likes him the most on the staff beside Andy Reid? Patrick Mahomes. Like I'm sorry, I'm giving that guy some credit of understanding what can coach or not. Nobody. Bill Walsh would have struggled with Mitch Trubisky. How many games would Belichick have won with Mitch Trubisky? The guy can't hit water if he's sitting on a boat in the middle of the ocean. So I think Andy Reid. The scary part is, Colin, he's just not done. Like all this retirement talk. Andy's not a golfer. He's not a fisher.
No, and also to your point, they'll move off Chris Jones. They've done a good job drafting Karlaftis and some other players. They got some pass rush, so they'll move off Chris. They'll probably try to get Kelsey to sign another deal. But I mean, they're not. I mean, the smart teams in this league, I think, they'll pay a front five guy, Aaron Donald, Rams. They'll pay him. Chris Jones. But the smart teams in this league, this is what drives me crazy about Pittsburgh. You can't be spending your money on defense. Outside of a TJ Watt, you just got to go draft safeties and corners. And most of these guys, if you look at them, Kansas City, they're not drafting a corner. They'll occasionally, if it's a big need, they'll go early, but a lot of them are 4th, 5th, and 6th round draft picks. Same with running backs. So I just think, I look at Andy and I think to myself, New England started to show signs of regression even after the Atlanta Super Bowl. It was very obvious they could not draft a receiver or a tight end after Gronk. You started seeing that at the end. Remember Brady on the bench screaming, "Get open." I don't know where Kansas City's organization has a hole. Draft, develop, communication, quarterback, defense, bags. I always felt you could really see the more power Bill got, the worse the drafting got. It wasn't even an argument. I mean, like Veach's hit. Like he's like Brad Holmes in Detroit. You go to the last 3 years, you got like 6 hits
in the late rounds too. It's not even just the first rounds. He's getting Pacheco's a 7th rounder. Watson, the DB, I think was a 7th rounder. So they're getting players all over the draft.
Yeah, they don't really have. I mean, they really don't. They've got the ability to move off really popular, talented guys, which a lot of organizations don't. They just can't move off them. I think, I mean, I'm trying to think my next year's Super Bowl bubble. I thought this was the year to get Kansas City.
Yeah. I thought last year was too, and they've won 2. I mean, I was thinking, I've been watching, I'm almost 40 years old. So I remember watching sports for 30 years, right? The Cowboys in the mid 90s had a great run. The Yankees, obviously the Bulls, the Patriots had a couple iterations. This 5-year stretch by the Chiefs, 3 Super Bowls, been to another and lost it, been to 6 straight AFC championship games. It's as good of a run.
Yeah.
Some of the Warriors, and the difference of the Warriors, I mean, they got Kevin Durant, so of course they weren't going to lose. Some of those Yankee teams, they had unlimited money. They were buying players. The way they've done it, this is a lot very similar to the Patriots. They made some tough decisions. It was coaching, development, led by star quarterback, led by intelligence, led by character. The other thing with my guy on the Chiefs, and this is where I think the two teams have a lot in common, the character on these teams, how hard these guys work, how into football they are, how much they care about football, how serious they take this. Like this is not some screw around. Half the teams in the league, I mean, some of their best players are not dependable guys on a 7-day-a-week basis. That is not the case with the Kansas City Chiefs. It's not the case with the 49ers. It's why these teams are kind of consistently winning, right? And obviously the Chiefs have that added element with Mahomes, which is kind of their trump card right now. But the football character that was on display in this game was something I would imagine every GM, when they go in a couple weeks, the combine's going to go. You start interviewing these guys. because it is easy. It's like, well, look at how many plays this guy can make. Well, he's got about 7 red flags. His offensive coordinator in college wasn't a big fan. And they don't overlook that stuff. Or they make sure that, like, that's a non-negotiable, because you get in the fourth quarter and overtime in your 21st game of the season. If you're not locked in, if you're not into it, if you haven't been training all year long, you have no shot. You have no shot. And that's the one thing Andy, who's always been, he had a little Al Davis to him at moments in his career. They are not screwing around in Kansas City with guys that just are like that. I mean, they do not have a guy on the team who's some huge red flag. And the other thing is, they get guys from culture. Look at MVS is a good example. Came from the Packers, had played in a lot of big games. Yeah, he had some drops. Now, granted, they didn't have a lot of other options. And they said, Tony, they took a flyer on that, right, a couple years ago, because they were pretty desperate. Where's Tony now? Nowhere to be seen.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're just done. You're saying all this moronic stuff. You're dropping. See ya. We're not even giving you a helmet anymore. Right. Yeah. And they just pick. A lot of teams would struggle because they need that speed. He's definitely one of the more talented players. You talk to them, they say, you should see this guy in practice. I can't trust him. And in a game like today, listen, because you're going to have Christian McCaffrey had a fumble today, right? You're going to have great players are going to screw up. But can I trust you in the biggest moments? And I thought today, for the most part, why I like this game so much, all the best players were making plays. Guys that had developed over the years were making plays. And both coaching staffs, beside a couple little things by the Niners, were pretty excellent.